I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, there's new hope for an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal. A terrorist becomes the mayor of the West Bank city of Hebron, and we'll reveal which new species has just been discovered in the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to arrive in Israel exactly 1 week from today. Ahead of the landmark visit, officials from both Egypt and Jordan say they're optimistic over the American leader's commitment to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's what's being heard from Amman after the Jordanian and Egyptian foreign ministers met with the chief Palestinian Authority negotiator to discuss the decades-long dispute. During a meeting with PA President Mahmoud Abbas earlier this month, Trump vowed to do whatever is necessary to broker peace with Israel. Although the American leader hasn't provided a specific plan to revive long-stalled negotiations, Israel's regional partners are pledging to do all that they can to help pave the path to peace.
We're committed to achieving that peace, and in that regard, we also discussed the outcome of the extremely positive and successful and productive talks the leaders had in Washington during their meetings with President Trump. We all value the obvious and solid commitment that the President had made to ensuring progress towards resolving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And as our leaders emphasized there, we are willing to do the heavy lifting. We are going to do whatever it takes to help push the process forward and to be there supporting the President and working with him.
The Arab Peace Initiative was a unilateral indication of the communal Arab decision to comprehensive, peaceful solution on the basis of two states living side by side, and continues to present a vision of the normalization of conditions in the region and the creation of new environment.
The Palestinians continue to insist increased settlement building in the West Bank jeopardizes a future state they want to establish both there and in Gaza, with East Jerusalem as the capital.
To continue the settlement activities on the land that's supposed to be the Palestinian state in the future is transmitting one message to people, that those who continue the settlement activities don't want the two-state solution. I really urge the Israeli government to choose between settlements or peace. And I hope that they will choose peace. We have negotiated. We will give peace a chance.
Israeli officials maintain they're open to land swaps that would facilitate a Palestinian state while retaining areas in the West Bank they regard as the Jewish people's biblical homeland of Judea and Samaria. Plans to expand an Israeli settlement near Jerusalem are moving along quickly just a week before U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to Israel. But the big question on everyone's minds is just how serious is Trump about moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem? The settlement of Kochav Yaakov is just a few miles away from the Israeli capital, and the community's council is now looking for contractors to build more than 200 new apartments. This construction plan was approved by the government years ago, but the previous developer went bankrupt before construction was complete. Still, it certainly seems like an expression of confidence in the new U.S.-Israel relationship, as the U.S.-mandated settlement freeze that hung over most of Barack Obama's 2 terms is over. At the same time, the chief Palestinian negotiator Gabe Erik is saying he hopes Israel will cease settlement construction during U.S.-led peace talks. This is a seeming reversal of the previous Palestinian precondition of no negotiations without a settlement freeze. And that's not the only big change on the horizon. It sounds like the long-promised move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem might actually happen. Prime Minister Netanyahu says that such an act would advance the peace process by shattering the Palestinian fantasy that Jerusalem is not the capital of Palestine. But Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is implying that the Israeli government is actually ambivalent about such a move, a rumor that's been circulating for weeks. Under the Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995, the U.S. government is legally required to move its Israeli embassy to Jerusalem, but the law has never been implemented until now. It's May 15th today, which for the Palestinian people marks the Nakba Day of catastrophe when Israel was founded in 1948. Imprisoned terrorist Marwan Barghouti is calling on Palestinians to carry out acts of civil disobedience to escalate tensions with Israel. He's also urging demonstrations of solidarity with inmates following the hunger strike he declared on April 17th. Barghouti is serving 5 life terms for orchestrating the murders of Israelis. The terror leader claims he's still observing the fast despite the release of videos that show him eating. Meanwhile, PA negotiator Gabe Erik says that if Israel ever truly wants peace, it has to recognize what a disaster its creation was and to apologize for it. Erik also calling on Britain to apologize for having denied what he says are the Palestinians' national rights and for issuing the 1917 Balfour Declaration advocating a Jewish homeland in Israel. London's not only refusing to express regret, but is instead expressing pride in the role it played in Israel's creation. Nakba Day was declared by Yasser Arafat in 1998 to commemorate the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who fled or were driven out during the war that erupted after Israel declared independence. The refugees and their descendants are today estimated to number about 5.5 million people. The already tense situation in Hebron is now being exacerbated by the election of a new mayor with a lot of blood on his hands. Convicted murderer Taysir Abu Sneineh took office on Saturday to the outrage of Jewish residents in the region, who have not forgotten his role in the massacre of 6 Israeli yeshiva students in 1980. Abu Sneineh and his terror cell opened fire on a group of Israelis who were on their way home, killing 6 and wounding 20. He was convicted of murder but was then released in a prisoner swap just 4 years later. Abu Sneineh's Fatah party has praised him as a hero who led a courageous operation against the settlers' soldiers. The head of the Shomron Regional Council is calling for President Donald Trump to cancel his upcoming meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in response to the election of this convicted terrorist. A cyber attack disrupted businesses, government, and medical service in around 70 countries this weekend, but quick action and a bit of luck has kept Israel in the clear. The country is still on high alert, though. There's been no damage to Israel's critical infrastructure from the attack, even though Russia and the United Kingdom fell victim to the exploit. Cybersecurity experts across Israel worked over the weekend to install a vaccine against the attack, taking direction from the National Cyber Bureau. But the CEO of Tel Aviv cyber firm White Hat says that luck has also played a large role. Since most businesses were closed for the weekend, it was easier to avert catastrophe. The cyber chaos isn't over, however. One former Shin Bet security agent is warning that cyber assaults are only likely to increase in scope and wreak even greater destruction in the future. Joining us now to discuss the threat of future cyber attacks is Gabe Erik, an information security expert and the co-founder of Secto. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so there is nothing more frightening than the idea of somebody hacking your computer and accessing your personal information online and then using that against you. And this type of damage is even greater when you're dealing with large companies and public entities, clearly. So let's start by having you explain what happened with this latest attack that we just spoke about.
Right. So basically, this attack is very similar to the same attack that has been happening for the past 3 years. It's what we call a ransomware-based attack. So basically, the criminals are infecting computers in organizations, and then, in this case, waiting until a specific time, and then triggering their attack at a single point of time across all the organizations.
So what does that type of damage look like? When you say an infection, how does that play out? What are the real-life implications?
So the initial infection just gives the criminals control. In this specific case, they installed a ransomware attack, which encrypts all the files of the companies, making them inaccessible. Wow. So technically speaking, what happens is those organizations are unable to access their data, and essentially everything is gone. Unless, of course, they pay a ransom. At least that's what the criminals are asking for.
So in this case, what just happened is a matter of criminals who want money, and they're, I guess, shutting down systems and public entities and large companies to get that money.
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, how did this attack manage to spread across the world and affect so many different countries?
So as I mentioned, this attack is the same as been happening for the past 3 years. The only difference is this time they're using a new weapon. They're using something called the NSA hack toolkit, or basically it's about a month ago or so, the NSA hacking tools were leaked to the public. And they're using those capabilities to spread across the world. And those capabilities let them essentially infect any computer they want with a single click.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. It's very, very interesting to hear about this. But I think what has been on our minds here, specifically in Israel, is why Israel was less affected, because we didn't see the same outcome here in the Israeli state. And some say that's because many of the businesses in Israel were closed on Saturday over the weekend. But is there more to that? Is there more behind why Israel wasn't affected?
So I think it's two reasons. One, again, luck. Luck is always good to have. And Friday, most businesses were closed. The way the attack happens is companies receive an email. It's usually called a spear phishing attack. It's an email that appears to be legitimate. It can be from Microsoft, from a friend of yours, and it has a link that you can press. And if you press it, you get infected. Now,
well, yeah, so if nobody's functioning in the office, obviously they're not going to open that email.
Exactly. So that's one of them. And the other is when we investigated this attack specifically, it seemed to target European countries first. You can even see it supports languages in many countries, but not Hebrew, at least not just yet. So it's really a question of time.
This is very interesting. Now, my question for you is, in the case that Israel were to be affected by this type of cyber attack, what are the consequences? And are the infrastructure bodies in Israel capable of handling and dealing with this type of attack?
So I think that the main risk to Israel, first of all, is not actually the ransomware, as it seems to appear in the media, but really a much bigger threat. So this new NSA tool gives the criminals access to all the computers. So if you have mobile operators or electrical companies or gas companies, they can use this capability to do whatever they want. So they can derail trains. They can disrupt the electricity. They can essentially do anything you can imagine. Healthcare, even worse. They might even take blood types and change them in actual accounts.
Is Israel prepared, for this type of cyber attack?
So it's a good question. I think that there are many security companies coming out of Israel. So Israel, in a sense, is a great place to be in because you get access to all these capabilities from all these different vendors. But what I would recommend to most of the companies is to actually be preemptive. So rather than wait for them to get attacked, they should react. And they should use capabilities to adapt, to learn and see how the attack actually happened, and then protect themselves before they get attacked.
And a lot of that software is coming out of Israel itself, these kind of preemptive ways in which you can protect your company, no?
Correct.
So, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what your company does. Have you created a software that helps deal with this?
Right, yes. So our solution is basically what we call preemptive incident response. Essentially, imagine like in the world of healthcare, let's say these attacks are basically like infections, like real-life biological infections. And no one company can, promise you one vaccine that blocks all types of infections beforehand. But when an infection spreads, you can react and respond as fast as possible, within minutes. And that's basically what our solution does. It gives the customers the ability to respond, and in just a few minutes, in this case, for example, a month ago, before the attack actually spread, to prepare and protect. And in fact, many of our customers have done that.
The world that we're living in is a very different one, and I think that it's becoming more and more clear that cyber attacks and cyber threats are one of the biggest issues that we're going to be facing. So it seems like the company that you've created and the software that you are offering is something that many companies may want to consider getting for themselves. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Now that tweeting has become such a popular way to communicate, have you ever wondered what it would be like if famous historical figures had the chance to describe momentous events in 140 characters or less? Well, the Israeli Foreign Ministry decided to have a little creative fun as part of 50th anniversary celebrations of Jerusalem's reunification. So now 1967 officially has its own Twitter account. Followers can read and retweet messages posted by many of Israel's founding leaders at the time of the Six-Day War. For example, the Israeli defense minister at the time, Moshe Dayan, writes, "Been a part of the hashtag IDF since I was 14, so it's time to prove my worth during the hashtag 6-Day War, hashtag on this day." Theodor Herzl, who's considered the father of modern Zionism, retweeted, "Very emotional day for me, hoping people will congratulate me on this momentous occasion. It was my idea, after all." Pretty cool for a guy who died in 1904 and never actually lived to see the fruition of his dream for a modern Jewish state. Other characters are fictitious, like an Israeli army reservist called up for duty and the wife he left behind. Foreign journalists are also posting live updates about the Israeli victory while it unfolded June 5th through the 10th. During that war, the Jewish state captured East Jerusalem and the West Bank from Jordan, in addition to Gaza from Egypt and the Golan Heights from Syria. More than 2,700 years after their ancestors were exiled, a group of Jews from India are today setting out to create new homes in the land of Israel. According to biblical accounts, Manasseh was one of the 10 lost tribes expelled from ancient Israel. The tribe's descendants in the Republic of India have been recognized since the late 20th century and are known as the Bnei Menashe. 102 community members immigrated to Israel just 3 months ago, and like all newcomers, they've been given free housing at state absorption centers. After completing their conversion to Orthodox Judaism and intensive Hebrew language studies, the new citizens are moving out today to embrace their new lives as Israelis. They'll be joining an already established community of other Jews of Indian origin living near Nazareth. Altogether, around 3 out of the 7,000 members of the Bnei Menashe have immigrated to Israel. Israeli kids are embracing the latest fad swirling across the world, and they all want fidget spinners. The problem is they just don't know how to refer to them in Hebrew. The ancient language of the Bible doesn't exactly have a comparable term for the gadget. There's actually an institute in Israel that comes up with names for modern items that didn't exist millennia ago. Sometimes they're pretty similar, like televizia for television. The Academy thinks this could be a great learning opportunity to engage kids in the concept of language evolution, so they're soliciting suggestions. They've also already garnered thousands of votes on Facebook in response to 18 different new Hebrew words they've posted. One is sariron, which is the word for spin, sarir combined with sevivon for a dreidel or a top. Another is savsevet, using the word for turn, but for now most of the kids are just calling it a fidget spinner, like the English with a Hebrew accent. The old folks are calling it chochke in Yiddish, or like moms everywhere say, "Can you please put that thing down and just do your homework?" Joining us today to discuss a special new Israeli film called Tikva is the composer, Dr. Baruch Berliner. And before we start our interview, we'd like to take a quick look at the trailer. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So what I would love to hear from you is just a little bit about this film. How did you guys come up with the idea for the film?
I had the idea to integrate somehow biblical text into music and to instill like this the text into people. I hope also that I'll get with a symphorock that was written on Genesis to the hearts of the youth in all schools in Israel.
So you went on a very special trip to Ukraine, correct?
Yes.
And that's how this film came about, this special Israeli delegation in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about that trip.
We came to Ukraine to participate in a special event in commemoration of 75 years of Babi Yar. This was a horrible massacre very early in the Second World War in September 1941. Now the Ukrainian government and the people are much more friendly to Israel, and they also give a lot of attention to that event, which they did not in the 50s, 60s, until the great Russian writer, poet, Yevtushenko has written a poem on it, and it could not be hidden anymore. I had the honor that the Ukrainian National Symphony Orchestra was playing two of my pieces, and the National Choir, very famous and good choir, Dumka, were singing their parts in the Symphony on Abraham in Hebrew.
Beautiful.
And without any accent. It was unbelievable.
It must have been such a special experience for you to be able to travel to this country where that type of respect for the Jewish people just didn't exist once. And so, I mean, I understand that you said this earlier, you have a long history of composing verses from the Bible. And what is your inspiration for that?
My inspiration is to spread the Bible via music, and the music I try to make very melodious. And actually I had successes. It was played, my two first symphonies were played all over the world, several times in California, in a festival in Poland, now in Bulgaria,
wow.
And of course in Kiev, and many times in Israel by different orchestras.
And little do people know it has such a historical connection. Well, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about this incredible film and about the history to your music, and I hope to watch the film myself.
Thank you.
From groundbreaking new technology to ancient archaeological findings, Israel is known for its incredible discoveries. But we bet you never imagined this one. For the first time in 109 years, researchers have identified a new species of butterfly in the Holy Land. The speckled creature is known as Accentrias fritillary, and it was discovered flying over the slopes at the Hermon ski resort in northern Israel. A team of researchers from the Zoological Institute in St. Petersburg, Russia, actually realized the species was out of the ordinary, even though thousands of people had already observed and even photographed the beautifully colored butterfly. Lepidopterists, which are butterfly and moth experts for those of you who don't know, were sure the butterflies had belonged to another species called the Persian fritillary, but it turns out their internal anatomy and DNA was totally different. For once, it looks like Israel, Syria, and Lebanon have something in common because a special butterfly likes spending its time flying across borders. At least it doesn't disturb security.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. For the first time in 109 years, a new species of butterfly has been discovered, and it's right here in Israel. So today's word is naturally palpal, which means butterfly in Hebrew. Palpal comes from the word pilpel, which is the Hebrew term to flutter. It makes sense since there's something profoundly lovely about seeing a butterfly flutter its way through your window. They say a palpal is proof that you can go through a great deal of darkness yet still become something beautiful. And we think that's true. Palpalim, or butterflies, help us remember that miracles are in fact possible. After all, who would expect a caterpillar to become something so magnificent? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a chance of mist along the coast and a low of 67 or 19 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow is expected to be fair with a drop in temperatures and a high of 81 or 27 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.6 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.